It was a crisp winter morning in New York City. The streets buzzed with the usual hustle and bustle as cars honked and pedestrians hurried to their destinations. Among the crowd, a lone figure sat on the cold pavement near the entrance of a busy restaurant. His name was Marcus, a man whose life had been an endless string of misfortunes. Clad in a threadbare jacket and torn sneakers, Marcus held a small, rusted tin can in his trembling hands. His face was weathered by years of hardship, yet his eyes carried a glimmer of hope, a quiet determination that refused to be extinguished. The coins in his can jingled faintly, the result of hours spent sitting in the freezing cold. The restaurant behind him was bustling with life. Through the frosted windows, Marcus could see families laughing, couples sharing intimate meals, and businessmen engrossed in conversations over steaming plates of food. The aroma of roasted meat and freshly baked bread wafted outside, tantalizing his senses. But Marcus was not bitter. Life had taught him that resentment would only add weight to his already heavy burdens. Instead, he sat quietly, greeting passers-by with a polite nod and a soft "God bless you" to those who spared a coin. As the morning stretched into noon, a sleek black limousine pulled up in front of the restaurant. The chauffeur stepped out and opened the door for a tall, elegantly dressed man. His tailored suit, polished shoes, and gold wristwatch screamed wealth and success. This was Richard Carter, a billionaire businessman known for his sharp mind and an empire that spanned continents. Richard walked into the restaurant with his usual air of confidence. He was a man who rarely encountered obstacles he couldn't overcome. Yet, today, fate had other plans. Inside, Richard ordered as usual, a 3-course meal with wine to complement. As he dined, his phone buzzed incessantly. Business never stopped, and he was used to juggling deals even during lunch. When it was time to pay, Richard reached for his wallet and handed over his card. The waiter returned moments later, apologetic. "Sir, there seems to be a problem with the payment. The card isn't going through." Richard frowned, pulling out his phone to check his accounts. The restaurant didn't accept cash, and the network for digital payments was down. Annoyed but composed, he tried several more times to no avail. The murmurs of other diners began to rise, and Richard felt the weight of their judgmental stares. Outside, Marcus noticed a commotion. Curious, he stood up and peered through the window. He saw the billionaire engaged in what seemed like an uncomfortable exchange with the waiter. Something stirred within Marcus, a strange mix of empathy and courage. He pushed open the restaurant door hesitantly. Heads turned as the beggar entered, his ragged appearance starkly out of place in the upscale establishment. Marcus approached the counter, his heart pounding. "Excuse me," he said quietly, his voice trembling. "How much does he owe?" The waiter, taken aback, replied, "$3.50. Without hesitation, Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled envelope. Inside was the money he had painstakingly saved over the years. His hands shook as he handed it over. "I'll pay for him," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. The room fell silent. All eyes were on the beggar who had just done the unthinkable. Richard turned to Marcus, astonishment etched across his face. "Why would you do this?" he asked, his voice a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. Marcus simply smiled. "Because everyone needs a little help sometimes." That single act of kindness would change both their lives forever. The restaurant's atmosphere remained frozen, as though the world itself had paused to witness the unthinkable. Richard Carter, a man accustomed to power and control, found himself at a loss for words. He stood before Marcus, staring at the man who had just paid his bill, a man who had so little yet gave so much. Richard cleared his throat, his deep voice breaking the silence. "Thank you," he said, extending his hand. Marcus hesitated before shaking it, his own rough and callous hand meeting the billionaire's smooth grip. "You're welcome," Marcus replied, avoiding eye contact. Richard gestured to a nearby table. "Would you sit with me?" "I'd like to talk." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Me? Sit in here." His eyes darted to the well-dressed patrons who were still staring at him. "Yes, here," Richard insisted. "I owe you that much." After a moment's hesitation, Marcus nodded. The waiter, still recovering from the unexpected turn of events, hurriedly led them to a quiet corner of the restaurant. Marcus sat stiffly, his discomfort evident as he avoided touching the pristine tablecloth. Richard studied him carefully. "What's your name?" "Marcus," he replied. "And how long have you been?" Richard hesitated, unsure of how to phrase the question. Marcus saved him the trouble. "Homeless? A few years now. Lost my job, then my home. Things just spiraled." Richard frowned. "And yet, you gave away your money for someone like me?" Marcus shrugged. "You look like you needed help. I've been there before, having nothing, needing kindness. People helped me when I needed it. This was my turn to do the same." Richard leaned back in his chair, marveling at the simplicity and depth of Marcus's words. "Do you know who I am?" Marcus shook his head. "Just a man who needed help. That's all I saw." Richard smiled. "I'm Richard Carter." The name meant nothing to Marcus, and it showed on his face. Richard chuckled, finding the moment oddly refreshing. "I'm a businessman," Richard explained. "Some might call me a billionaire, though titles don't mean much right now." Marcus nodded politely, still unsure why any of this mattered. Richard leaned forward. "Marcus, your kindness has moved me in a way I can't explain. You've reminded me of something I haven't felt in years, gratitude. And for that, I want to help you." Marcus stiffened. "I didn't do it expecting anything in return." "I know," Richard said gently. "That's what makes it so remarkable. But I have the means to change your life, and I want to. Will you let me?" Marcus hesitated, the weight of his pride clashing with the opportunity before him. Finally, he nodded. "If you really mean it, I'll accept. But I don't want charity. I want a chance to earn a living." Richard smiled, respect shining in his eyes. "Then a chance you shall have." For the rest of the meal, the two men talked. Richard, curious about Marcus's life, and Marcus, cautious but honest in sharing his story. By the time they left the restaurant, a plan was already forming in Richard's mind, one that would not only repay Marcus's kindness, but set him on a path to a better future. As they stepped out into the cold air, Richard's limousine pulled up. He turned to Marcus. "Come with me. Your life is about to change." Marcus hesitated at the open door of the sleek black limousine. The vehicle gleamed under the winter sun, a stark contrast to the tattered clothes he wore. He had never been this close to such luxury, let alone invited to step inside. "Don't be shy," Richard encouraged, his voice calm but firm. "You've earned this." Marcus looked at Richard, searching his face for any signs of insincerity. Finding none, he took a deep breath and climbed into the car. The plush leather seats were more comfortable than anything he had felt in years. The faint scent of cologne and polish would fill the air, a world away from the streets he had called home. As the car pulled away, Marcus sat rigidly, afraid to touch anything. He glanced at Richard, who seemed completely at ease, typing on his phone with quick, practiced movements. "Relax," Richard said without looking up. "This isn't a test." Marcus managed a small smile, but still felt out of place. "Where are we going?" "To my office," Richard replied. "I want to introduce you to my team and see where you might fit in." Marcus blinked. "Your office? You mean a job?" Richard turned to him, a small smile playing on his lips. "I meant what I said, Marcus. You don't want charity, and I respect that. So, let's find a way for you to earn a living. Fair." Marcus nodded, a lump forming in his throat. He stared out the window as the city skyline blurred past, the towering buildings a stark reminder of the life he had lost. The limousine pulled up to a towering glass skyscraper in the heart of Manhattan. Marcus gawked at the building, its reflective surface glinting like a jewel in the midday sun. People in expensive suits hurried in and out, their expressions purposeful and confident. Richard stepped out first and motioned for Marcus to follow. As they entered the grand lobby, Marcus felt every pair of eyes turned toward him. He could hear whispers, feel the weight of judgment in their stares. Mr. Carter, a receptionist, greeted warmly. "Shall I call the boardroom for you?" "Not yet, Amanda," Richard replied. "Just arranging a tour for my guest." The receptionist's eyes flicked to Marcus, and though her smile faltered, she quickly regained her composure. "Of course, sir." Richard led Marcus to a private elevator, swiping a key card to access the top floors. As the elevator ascended, Marcus fiddled nervously with the edge of his coat. "You'll be fine," Richard said, his tone reassuring. "Remember, everyone here works for me. If anyone gives you trouble, they'll answer to me." Marcus nodded, but his palms were slick with sweat. When the elevator doors opened, they revealed a sprawling office floor that looked more like a luxury hotel. Glass walls offered panoramic views of the city, and the open layout buzzed with activity. Employees paused to greet Richard, their voices respectful and tinged with admiration. "This is where I run my empire," Richard said, gesturing to the space. "And this is where your journey begins." Marcus swallowed hard. "I don't even know what I could do here." Richard smiled. "We'll figure that out. For now, I want you to meet someone." He led Marcus to a corner office where a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a welcoming smile sat behind a desk piled with folders. "Janet, this is Marcus," Richard said. "He's going to be working with us." Janet arched an eyebrow but said nothing. "Nice to meet you, Marcus," she said, extending a hand. Marcus shook it, feeling the warmth in her grip. "Nice to meet you too, ma'am. Janet's my operations manager," Richard explained. "She'll help you find your footing." Janet nodded. "Marcus, tell me a bit about yourself. What kind of work have you done before?" Marcus hesitated, his cheeks burning with embarrassment. "I haven't had much steady work lately, but I'm willing to learn. I'll do anything." Janet gave him an encouraging smile. "That's a good start. We'll take it one step at a time." Richard placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You've got potential, Marcus. I see it. Now, let's get you started." As Marcus followed Janet to a desk, he felt a flicker of hope ignite in his chest. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving. He was beginning to live again.